Dear colleagues, hello. First of all, please excuse my wonderful French accent and my slight difficulty speaking English. I would like to address a key issue that has suddenly resurfaced: the supervision of executives as a substitute for executive coaching. What dangerous nonsense! Getting started, I want to say a big thank you to Michel Moral, Master of Science, Doctor in Clinical Psychology, who has worked for several years within the international working group that reflected on the professional charter for coaching, mentoring, and supervision of coaches, mentors, and supervisors, which was co-signed by 8 professional bodies, including the EMCC, the ICF, and Association for Coaching. The Charter is a joint initiative aimed at self-regulation, and it reflects the mission of these professional bodies to promote and ensure good practices in coaching, mentoring, and supervision of coaching and mentoring. Its draft, as per European law and registered on the publicly accessible European Union database, co-managed by the European Commission and the European Economic and Social Committee. At a crucial time when our professional support professions have finally gained recognition, it would be dangerous to undermine years of work around the world and the future cohesion of our coaching professions for the sake of personal marketing. Yet, this is precisely what the bizarre term executive supervision, which is reappearing once again, promises to generate if we are not careful. It highlights a number of serious problems that have already been raised many times and which we had hoped would be buried once and for all. But some illusions die hard and remind us of the problems of stake: legal, insurance, contractual, ethical, professional, and even semantic. And that's not all. Supervising means checking, evaluating, and giving advice to fix mistakes, non-compliance, and so on. It also means ensuring the safety of a practice that is complex because it's based on human beings, and it means knowing how to report on one's practice for the benefit of support professionals, both for themselves and for their clients. And even though I have been a coach supervisor for several years, I have also always been supervised in many practices as a professional coach without interruption. For CEOs, all of this is largely governed by various regulations in Europe and around the world, and this process of executive supervision can have a very direct impact on legal, financial, and strategic matters, and makes the supervisor jointly responsible for results beyond the scope of the support process alone. It's an integral part of the statutory governance of the organizations concerned. So think of a supervisor, unlike a professional coach, as someone who can intervene without any time limit or significantly longer than a professional coach, who generally limits themselves to a maximum of 10 or 12 sessions. There are many interdependencies and risk of dependency and unregulated influence. Professional associations, such as those for accountants, lawyers, regulatory bodies, such as ORIAS in France, 𝗍𝗂𝗄 in Germany, the 𝗱𝗵𝗴 in Belgium, the 𝗘𝗐𝗄𝗃 in Spain, and the 𝗍𝗂𝗄 in Luxembourg, to name but a few of the regulatory bodies, should rightly respond, and I think this is entirely normal. Finally, this designation is often more of an individual marketing strategy to differentiate themselves from executive coaches than it's a specific or new practice or responsible to the needs of executives not covered by executive coaching. The proof is that when we ask these people, their response is often, "We have a more advanced reflective practice," as if announcing that you do a little more of something constitutes a new skill. Big deal. Or we use supervision tools, as if coaching were limited to tools, which experienced executive coaches also use, such as parallel processes, or systemic reflection, or 𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗀 approach, for example, even though we rightly tell coaches in training that coaching is not primarily a set of tools. All of this is serious enough. Too many coach supervisors, myself included, are strongly opposed at this stage and without significant additional information to the use of such an expression. If serious, factual, tangible, and significant elements, such as a set of specific skills, were provided to us, I would be the first, of course, to be already together with representative organizations to review my position without any problem. And I can't be accused of being judge and jury in this matter, as I'm a professional coach and a long-standing certified coach supervisor, and therefore hold both titles. I will now go through each of these points and support them as best I can. I apologize in advance if I'm not exhaustive, as this term undermines the contract, values, and ethics of our professions in many ways. Moreover, the words used in coaching have a central meaning and must remain a solid foundation for contractualizing the relationship with the person being coached, the company or the organization to which they belong. We often say that the quality of the contract is key to laying the foundations of a healthy framework, particularly to avoid psychology games. Claude Steiner specified that a healthy contract has 4 key points. I have formalized a 5th point, which is obvious. And with my colleague Michel Moral, we have clarified and expanded on the first point. First, the greatest possible informed consent of the parties. 2, being within one's field of competence. 3, fair remuneration. 4, legal framework. 5, possibility of determining the contract under fair conditions for all. Let's start with the definition of the word supervision, if words still have meaning, which means to exercise control or carry out checks on the activity or works of a person or group of people. Controlling or verifying the activity or work a person requires a common field of expertise. This is the case between a coach supervisor and a coach. This is the case between a supervisor or a psychologist and psychologist. Same applies to social workers and other works. But between a supervisor of executives and executive, which is not a profession but a function defined by statutory governance, unless both come from the same core business and are confined to it, to an organization to the same size, very similar, is this possible and desirable, or financial, legal, or other experts specifically identified and forming an integral part of the so-called statutory governance structure, the common field of expertise is really questionable. Some of these executive supervisors don't understand holding company structures and how they work, creating subsidiaries, managing cash flow, talking to or speaking the language of investment funds, organizing fundraising, have never dealt with heads of state, have never had to manage a communications crisis. And they claim to supervise the practices of executives? As professional coaches, it's not our focus, as we are concerned with the processes that enable executives to develop their own solutions. But as supervisors of executive practices, it certainly is. The term monitoring or coaching, which refer to processes rather than content, are infinitely more appropriate and do not present any risk of confusion, of responsibilities, or influence. Thus, if the task is to supervise the executive's activity, the supervisor is in fact linked to the results of the executive's activity, and it's therefore jointly responsible for them. It would therefore be quite logical that in the event of failure or misconduct, the supervisor could be held directly accountable by the shareholders, the board of directors, the employee representative bodies, or colleague of the supervised executives. In this, what the proponents in this expression want? Were they aware of this? Did they take the necessary step back when they claim to offer a more meaningful space for reflection than executive coaches? Some have just gone too far, while others twist words to defend the indefensible. Furthermore, executives already have never control on their shoulders without adding someone else to supervise their practice. They don't need additional supervision. They already have their board of directors, their works council, and their shareholders, for that not mention their family or regulators, such as the Autorité des marchés financiers in France, the Securities and Exchange Commission in US, the Financial Conduct Authority in England, for example, and many other types of regulatory bodies in different sectors. On the other hand, we don't need to divide our profession. Executive coaches need trained, reliable supervisors with whom they can form a peaceful alliance without the potential stress of finding themselves in unfair competition with their supervisor, who present themselves as more legitimate to coach their clients. I'm concerned about the lack of perspective, systemic awareness, and ethics demonstrated by some. It's essential that serious and representative professional organizations quickly deliver a clear message on this subject to protect our clients, the profession, and the quality of the coach-supervisor relationship. Legal risk, of course. What responsible insurer will take the initiative to assume a risk that is, by definition, very complex to assess, given the diversity of the disparate mission profiles of executives? What do a 10-person accounting firm or OpenAI startup founder Sam Altman, or Ford CEO Jim Farley, and Amazon boss Jeff Bezos have in common? I'd like them to come and tell us. Who can claim to supervise their activities? On what basis of specific common skills? We can't expect to see a flood of legal proceedings in the years to come. Finally, between a coach supervisor and a coach, between a psychologist, supervisor, and a psychologist, between a social worker, supervisor, and a social worker. In addition to the common field of expertise, there is also a shared code of ethics, workshops for exchanges and best practices, peer group, and very often professional organizations that offer a solid platform for the exchange of practices. regulation, and support. I have seen nothing of the sort between executives and those who call themselves executive supervisors. Let's stop the inflation of marketing terms as soon as possible, before it's too late for some and before our profession becomes fractured. We have other more appropriate options, such as a reflection space for executives, which could complement the current offering of executive coaching without twisting words, fermenting the profession, or resorting to contractual sleight of hand. We have many other issues that are infinitely more important and ambitious than marketing logic for the few. Let's work toward a healthy and lasting alliance between professional coaches and their supervisors. I'm a professional coach and a coach supervisor, certainly not a supervisor of executives, even though I myself, in other life, have dealt with some highly technical subjects, such as those mentioned above. Let's not confuse everything, and thank you for attention.